The first thing she said when I opened my front door was not hello. She stood on my porch, breathing hard, her eyes darting toward the quiet street behind her, and whispered, "Simone's following me." For a few seconds, I couldn't move. This was supposed to be a simple blind date arranged by my sister. A coffee, maybe dinner, an awkward conversation, and then we would both go home. Instead, a frightened stranger had appeared at my doorstep on a rainy Thursday evening, and somehow, opening that door would change both our lives forever. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances can change someone's life, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the beginning of a completely different future. My name is Nathan, and at 38, I had almost given up on the idea of finding someone. I lived alone in a modest house outside Portland, Oregon, worked as a high school counselor, and had become comfortable with quiet evenings and predictable mornings. My younger sister Rachel had been insisting for months that I needed to meet someone, so when she told me about a woman named Hannah, I reluctantly agreed to a blind date. She described Hannah as kind, intelligent, and a little shy. What she forgot to mention was that Hannah would arrive at my house looking as though she had been running from something she desperately wanted to leave behind. I stepped aside and let her in. She apologized repeatedly, explaining that she had noticed the same dark sedan several blocks away, and then again near my neighborhood. She wasn't certain the driver was following her, but fear had convinced her not to take chances. I locked the door, offered her a glass of water, and told her she could stay as long as she needed. Hannah sat on the edge of my couch, trying to steady her hands. The strange thing was that she wasn't afraid of me. She seemed embarrassed that she had brought her fear into a stranger's home. As the rain tapped against the windows, she slowly told me the truth. Her father, Thomas, had passed away 6 months earlier after a long illness. Before he died, he had left Hannah a small box containing letters and an old photograph. The photograph showed him standing beside another man outside a community center in Portland. On the back, Thomas had written only 3 words: "Find Marcus Bennett." Hannah had spent weeks trying to discover who Marcus was and why her father had never mentioned him. The dark sedan had appeared after she began asking questions. I expected a complicated mystery, but what Hannah discovered the next morning was far more emotional than either of us imagined. With the help of an old librarian named Mrs. Carter, we found a newspaper article from 25 years earlier. It explained that Thomas and Marcus had been close friends who had worked together at a neighborhood food pantry. During a difficult period in Thomas's life, Marcus had quietly helped him pay rent and keep his family fed. Then Marcus disappeared from his life after a painful misunderstanding. Hannah realized her father hadn't left the photograph as a warning. He had left it as an unfinished apology. The following week, Hannah and I found Marcus living in a small apartment across town. He was older now, tired, and deeply surprised to see Thomas's daughter standing at his door. Marcus revealed that he had never stopped caring about Thomas. Years earlier, he had received a letter accusing him of abandoning their friendship, but he had never known the letter had been written by someone else. Thomas had spent decades believing Marcus had chosen to walk away. The person Hannah thought had been following her turned out not to be a threat at all. It was Marcus's nephew, David, who had noticed Hannah searching through old records and had been trying to find out whether she was connected to Thomas. He had been too nervous to approach her, making the whole situation appear far more frightening than it was. When Hannah finally gave Marcus the old photograph, the elderly man began to cry. He held it against his chest and whispered that he had waited 25 years for the chance to tell his friend he was sorry. Hannah told him that her father had spent his final months talking about the people who mattered most, and Marcus's name had been one of them. I watched them embrace, and something inside me shifted. I had spent years thinking love was about finding someone who could make my life easier. That night, I realized it was often about being willing to stand beside someone while they carried something heavy. Month passed. Hannah and I continued seeing each other, but our relationship didn't grow because of some perfect romantic moment. It grew through ordinary things: grocery shopping, long walks laughing over terrible movies, Sitting silently when one of us had a difficult day, we learned that trust wasn't built in a single evening. It was built one small promise at a time. One Sunday afternoon, Hannah placed a photograph on my kitchen table. It was a new picture of her, Marcus, and me standing together at the community center where her father had once worked. She smiled and told me that sometimes the right person doesn't enter your life when everything is calm. Sometimes they arrive carrying fear, unfinished memories, and questions you never expected to answer. If this story touched something inside your heart, please like the video and share it with someone who might need to hear that second chances are still possible. Your support helps these stories reach people who may be quietly going through their own difficult chapter. And before the story ends, I want to ask you something. Have you ever met someone unexpectedly who changed the direction of your life? Leave a comment and tell us your story. Someone reading it today may need that reminder more than you know. A year after that rainy Thursday, Hannah and I stood on the same porch where she had once whispered that someone was following her. This time, there was no fear in her eyes. There was only peace. She reached for my hand and smiled. I thought about how easily I could have ignored that knock. How easily I could have decided that her problem wasn't mine. But sometimes life places a frightened person at your door, not because you're supposed to fix everything, but because you're simply supposed to open it. And sometimes, when you open the door for someone else, you discover that you were the one who had been waiting for a way back into hope.